Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to the fifth part of the Q&A in the context of the lecture series True Dhamma, following in the footsteps of the Buddha. With me I have Saif and myself, Florian, and today we will answer the next batch of questions. There are still a lot of questions coming in, so I'm quite sure that there will be at least one additional part of the series, and then depending on the questions that you ask in addition to those that are already there. But without further ado, I think we will just begin with the first question. And this one is from Trace Reaper, and he wants to know, in regard to the danger, are we not already suffering from madness in a sense, which is why we don't see the true nature of things? Just to recall the context of that question, not seeing the danger in sensuality is a bit of madness. And I think the Buddha gave us quite a few similes on that one. For example, a person who has overcome sensuality, he compared that person with a person who previously suffered from leprosy and is now cured. And those people that suffered from leprosy usually gathered around fire pits and heated up iron rods to burn the wounds, and they got some satisfaction from that. And when that person is healed and other people would drag that person to a fire pit to burn that person, then they would wiggle and try to break free and be everywhere but in that fire pit or near that fire pit. So in a sense, while we previously regarded sensuality as quite normal, once we notice it as painful, once we had that insight and pretty much surmounted sensuality, then we will notice our mistake and see that the fire or sensuality has always been very painful, and not just afterwards when you understood it. And yeah, in that case, a person who engages in sensuality is pretty mad from the point of view of Dhamma. It is still a natural thing to do, that much I want to say. It feels immediately inviting, it makes the craving go away, and you get some additional pleasure on top of it, while also making craving stronger in the process and making the entire mechanism stronger and stronger, so you are caught up in it even more. But immediately it seems inviting, while it is absolutely not. Yeah. Anything you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, the only thing is obviously the extent of how mad it is that you can't see it unless you have withdrawn sufficiently, especially because that's, like you were saying, it's everyone's natural inclination. So what seems like the most normal thing in the world is literally what everyone does is madness, from the perspective of the Buddhist teaching. But you have to be withdrawn to see it, and then you will see it that way.
No. If you do not develop that perception, then your practice might be developing in the wrong direction, which is also a good sign and feature you could use to assess how wrong or right you are doing things. Yeah, well, I think that's enough for that question. Let's move to the next one. This one is from an anonymous person, and the person asks, is the body referenced through each of your senses a different mind object? And if so, why does the mind make it one? This one is for you. Maybe you understand it.
Do you want to give it a go? I feel like you might be able to answer better.
I can try. I'm also not sure if I fully understand it, to be honest. I guess you can use every sensory organ to create an image, which also contains the body in the body, or what you think of as the body. So when you see your body, there is an image of the body which stands for your body. And when you hear, then you can also hear certain sounds that are characteristic for your body. You can feel your body, and each different sensory organ can, in a sense, create an image of the body. And I think the person is referring to that. Why the mind makes all those different sensory inputs into one body. It all references the same thing, in a sense, despite the sensory inputs being different ones. And maybe based on that, you have a good answer.
I mean, why the body makes it one?
Or the mind makes it one.
That just seems like the setup of the aggregates, right?
Yeah. Well, I personally...
It is a good sort of contemplation to sort of think of, because yeah, when you have the self view, that sense of like a unity for all of it. Maintaining that is a sort of way of proliferating the sense of ownership. So contemplating the separate domain of each of the senses, like the I and the I consciousness and the I forms and so on for each of the senses, and seeing them as separate domains can be used as a way of undermining that sense of unity. But as to why it makes it one, that's just kind of the setup of the aggregates, and like many other things, it's just how they are basically. There is no why to it necessarily. If I understand the question correctly, there might be an answer to it. Otherwise, but I'm not fully sure on the question really.
Well, I do think that you understood it at least the same way that I understood it. And it is true. When you see that the different sensory organs supply a different body image that you previously took as one, then you can kind of make two out of that. And when you make two out of that, there is no single point anymore, no single self that orchestrates the entire process, which is actually quite a good way of gaining insight into dependent origination. Because when there is no single point anymore, there is no self anymore. Because self is that one entity that is always there, that is pretty much eternal and permanent in the background. And yeah, when there are two, it's not one self anymore. Oh.
Yeah.
I hope that answers that one. Let's maybe move to the next question. And this one is from another anonymous person. And the person wants to know, is all necessary information always available in the present moment? How about memory? And I would assume that refers to everything that is necessary for liberation. Maybe you can take that one.
Yeah, everything is available in the present, mainly because, I mean, all experience is in the present. Like even memory, when you have thoughts and perceptions about the past or even about the future, they're always just presently arisen perceptions and thoughts and everything. It's only because you don't contextualize in that way. When you have thoughts about the past, you feel like you're stretching into the past or stretching into the future. And yeah, even like the entire past lives or the entire samsara, basically, like the Buddha says that the entirety of the universe is found in this fathom-long body. And yeah, that's basically, if you understand the present nature of things, you understand the universal nature of the universe, of reality, of, like the Buddha always says, like present, past, future, refined, unrefined, far, near. All of it is contained just within the present nature of the framework of the experience. So it's always, yeah, you're looking at the present arisen nature. Obviously, there's like this idea of like being in the now and being in the present is very like a popular idea, but you don't want to get the wrong idea about it, because a lot of these modern ideas always think about the present like in terms of the particular content of what's going on right now. So for example, if there are thoughts about the past, you want to like stop thinking too much about the past and just feel the sensations going on right now. That type of thing. That's not exactly what we mean about being in the present. Being in the present is not about trying to slide away from thoughts about the past or thoughts about the future. It's about with whatever's arisen, whether it is thoughts about the past, you include it within the framework of the present. And that's how you see everything in the present. It's not like you try to block out things and then just feel what's going on right now. It's more like you include everything so that everything is included within what is going on right now. So it's not about the content of what's going on. It's about whatever is happening. It's within the present framework, and then you get to see like That's why the Sotapanna's insight is whatever has arisen is subject to cessation, because it's like, yeah, whatever is possible to arise, be present within the experience, that's automatically understood because you understand what's going on right now. Yeah.
I have maybe one more thing to add. I think the word presence, especially for those people who read and follow Eckhart Tolle, is pretty much used equivalent to mindfulness or to awareness of things, self-awareness pretty much. And in that sense, presence is pretty much necessary, but it's not so much about the presence itself. It is about what you do in the present and not so much about just maintaining mindfulness. And in that sense, it is oftentimes wrong mindfulness. If it is right mindfulness, that includes anicca and the three marks and everything, then it's no problem. Then that's pretty much what you must do. But if that is not yet right mindfulness, that includes all the marks pretty much and everything, the mindfulness that sees everything as anicca as it arises, that Saif has just mentioned, then that's problematic. Because if you then think that all you must do is stay present, then that is a very wrong view. And that must be abandoned. But yeah.
I mean, if you think about it, like we've talked about before, like we talk about mindfulness of death being the fastest way to seeing all the marks and fastest way to enlightenment. And if you think about death, that's like the most sort of non-present thing in a sense. But if you are being like present in the way the Buddha talks about, mindfulness of death is actually the correct way, because it's all about including things within that container that makes things impermanent. That's how you be in the present, basically. That's what you were saying earlier. It's about whatever's arisen, you include it within the container of the present. And because it's included in a container, everything is seen as impermanent. And then there is no way to escape into the past or the future. Everything's just it's just contained. There's no sliding in and out of it. There's no craving in regards to it.
Yeah. Essentially, you just want to include everything into the present. That's maybe a good way of putting it. And when everything is in the present, you cannot get lost anymore. And yeah, everything is there that you need. And in essence, you kind of want to make your context or your present moment, or however you want to put it, as wide as possible, so that everything is included. And then there is all the information that you need. Then there's always a perception of anicca, dukkha, anatta. Yeah, I think that's enough on that question. Let's maybe move to the next one. And this one is from another anonymous person. And that person wants to know, does an Arahant feel like they were always enlightened once the ignorance is abandoned as a self-base? No, an Arahant can remember how things were for him, just like any other person can remember. I think in the suttas there was an Arahant that was walking through the wood and was saying magnificent, magnificent, and others thought he was crazy, but he was just remembering his previous life as a householder, where he was in constant fear all the time, because there were people who wanted his property, his throne, pretty much. He was a prince or a king. And upon remembering that, he was glad and full of joy, and he even felt the need to announce it to the world. So he can pretty much remember his past life. And does it feel like they were always enlightened? Well, we probably have to find out and become an Arahant. Maybe you have something to say about that.
I mean, yeah, the only way that they could think that they were always enlightened is if the truth that the Buddha was offering was that there is no self. But it's always dependent origination. It's always with ignorance there is self. Without ignorance there is no self. And that is the understanding of an Arahant. And so they realize I had ignorance and it's faded away. That's why the self has faded away. So yeah, the only thing is maybe like if they've been an Arahant for a very long time, they just sort of get used to it, and it's they don't really think much about how it used to be. But even then, they always know fully that they used to be ignorant and now it's faded.
Yeah, the past is still a part of your experience. There still can be thoughts about the future and thoughts about the past. It's not that those are gone and suddenly there's just a present moment. they are contained in the present moment, but they stay there. It's just that you don't really get lost in them anymore as before. But that is already true for a Sotapanna, pretty much. And not just for an Arahant. Oh, anything else on that one?
No, that's it from my viewpoint, at least.
I also have nothing to add. Okay, then the next one. And I think we kind of answered that one, but let's still maybe give a short answer. Another anonymous person wants to know, do you ever come to know why we are forced to accumulate and suffer by nature? I mean, the original cause of samsara, pretty much. And this one is for you.
No. And the Buddha said that you went as far back as you can, but you can never see a beginning to samsara. It is beginningless in that sense. And yeah, you only have to like see that within your own experience, that like, I didn't know where this experience came from. And as far as back as I can go, it's just something has arisen and I had no choice in it. And it doesn't matter how far back you go, that's all you basically see. So yeah, these are one of the questions that Buddha said, you shouldn't think about it too much. And thinking about it too much it's not going to lead you to the end of suffering, basically. So instead of thinking why we are forced to accumulate originally, you just have to think why we are forced to accumulate, like right now. What's the presently arisen condition of my suffering? And that's my continual ignorance of the three marks, right here, right now.
Mm-hmm. The right question would be, why do I continue to accumulate all the suffering, and not so much why it originally came to be?
Yeah.
And that will resolve the entire problem of suffering if you be diligent about it.
That's important to think, because dependent origination is very much about that. It's about why I'm presently giving nutriment to my suffering right now. It's not about there was this first cause in the past, there was ignorance, and then that like caused all of this suffering to arise. No, it's like because there's ignorance right now, it's continuing basically the cycle of suffering right here, right now.
No. Yeah. I think that answers that question. Let's move to the next one. Maybe today we are a bit faster than the other days. And this person, another anonymous person, wants to know, so what's the point in training the mind to not attack itself if it's going to die dissolve anyway? Well, so I assume this talks about the full cessation of self, and this person is asking from the point of view of a practitioner, of an unenlightened person. And to that person, it seems to me, the idea of Nibbana very much seems like complete annihilation. Like death, in a sense. And that is somewhat accurate, I would say, but the thing is, if you do not train your mind, then whatever death or dissolution of the body you go through will not be the end. There will be an entire, pretty much eternity of samsara and suffering awaiting for you, and this is what you kind of try to overcome with the practice that the Buddha described. So by training the mind to not attack itself, you can actually overcome suffering once and for all, and not just die and then reappear somewhere else and then suffer again and again. So that's kind of the point of it all. That's why we want to escape samsara. Anything you want to add?
Yeah, the mind is going to die, but like Flaus was saying, unless you have realized that and stopped clinging to it, then your craving and relishing and self-view in regards to it is a basis for the continued existence. So, yeah. The other thing you could think of, I don't know if the person was thinking about it this way, but it could be like a nihilist view of like, why do I need to act when I'm going to die anyways, and then sort of nothing matters. But it's all the same thing where you just have to think about the possibility of rebirth, because it is a possibility that, even if you haven't confirmed it, you just have to think that it's, I don't know what happens. And, what if there is something more? And it keeps going on forever. And then you realize that your actions do matter. in that sense. You can't just sort of laze about and then you'll die someday and then it won't matter anyways. Like every action you do is going to have consequences in that sense. So
No.
I don't know which way the question was leaning towards in that way, but there's two different answers there.
Well, now both are answered, so... No, I don't think I have to add anything more. Let's move to the next one. Oh, and this one is a bit longer. Another anonymous person wants to know. In the video regarding your spiritual journey, you mentioned that you did Mahasi style practice for a time and it helped you on your journey. As far as I know, these were not taught by the Buddha. Of course, they can still be beneficial, but I was wondering what your view is in hindsight. Could you have followed a different approach knowing what you know now? Should a beginner attempt noting or just stick to breath meditation as described by the Buddha? Well, I will answer as it was directly targeted towards me. I did that for a very short time, and it helped me in that regard that I started reflecting about my experience more. So it gave me a clue in the direction that helped me clarify the 5 aggregates that constitute my experience. So in that regard, it helped as a starting point for investigation. By starting to note or label a little, I looked in a direction that I previously ignored. But in itself, that practice, there's nothing special about that practice. So you could also just start thinking about that. It is just that it happened by chance that I encountered that practice and it pulled the trigger for me that made me think about such things. There's no need to really label or note everything that is going on. There's no magic in that practice. It can make you calm, yeah, sure. It can make you feel good, sure, that's also possible. But those are all not really the goals, at least not if the right view or the stream entry is what you strive for. If your goal is just to be calm, sure, do those practices. They can do that very much. But again, that is not the goal of this lecture. We actually want to show people the way out of suffering and not how to get calm. So in hindsight, I would just recommend to ponder about your experience and clarify everything that you do not understand, and really make sure that you know what those words that you use in your everyday language are pointing to. For example, if you use the word feeling, what does it mean in your experience? What are you designating with it? Do you know what the word consciousness in your experience directly right here, right now means? Those are things that you can contemplate. Just try to clarify what the 5 aggregates are, get a good understanding of that, and that's probably much more fruitful than any labeling practice will ever be, because labeling is in a sense mechanical. There's no insight that you can expect from that. Yeah, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, like you said, there is a difference between the practice you recommend and this style. Since like the noting is obviously, if you like develop clarity beforehand about the nature of feeling, then simply noticing feeling can be a suitable basis. But it can just be a sort of mechanical noting. And if so, the best thing to do is really to clarify the experience, like you said, and just literally ask yourself questions about it.
No.
Yeah. Even like at the end of the question, you mentioned the breath meditation. Maybe even breath meditation is not the right thing to do, and you should just focus on like renunciation and clarifying the nature of the experience.
No. This is kind of important, in my view, that you, again, all the answers we give are in the context of trying to attain the right view. This should be something that should always be on the back of your mind. If your goal is to attain calm or everything or anything like that, then this might not be the immediate thing that you want to try. Ultimately, there's great calm to be gained from everything we explain here, but it's probably not as immediate as you would like it to be. Maybe that might be a problem. And as Saif said, we have a tendency as humans, as we want immediacy, to use breath meditation as an example to generate pleasure for us. And that should kind of be avoided. We don't want to develop yet another coping tool. We want to actually learn things about our experience, learn things about our suffering and all those things. So by all means, rather practice it in the gradual training, clarify those things that you don't understand, and that should be enough for the right view. Okay, I think that is enough. Let us move to the next question. Okay, we have another question from another anonymous person, and that person wants to know, in the video regarding, oh, we had that one already. Let's move to the next one. Another anonymous person wants to know, you mentioned in your videos that stream entry comes from understanding, not just meditation. I'm still a bit confused about what understanding means. In meditation, a tool to have a collected mind so that we can then internalize the teaching of the suttas in an experiential way. It seems to me that meditation is a huge part of making progress. From the way you describe it, there does seem to be an intellectual element to it. This one is for you.
Yeah, there's an intellectual element, but there's a difference between the understanding we're talking about and a sort of mere, like the Buddha calls it, like mere reasoning. There is like, when you start out, you do have to sort of measure out the task and sort of theoretically penetrate, what the Buddha is talking about, how it makes sense and stuff. But the understanding has to be on the level of like, I see phenomenologically in my experience, what is the suffering, what is the origin of it, what is the cessation of it, basically the Four Noble Truths. And yeah, that is like an understanding in the same way like you understand like calculus or something. And that's like the thing you need to realize, is that a lot of people, they do meditation and they expect like the understanding to just come to them if they do specific practice enough, like if they focus hard enough or if they know for a long enough period of time. But like, yeah, like if you're like trying to understand calculus, for example, you can't just like repeat what some examples are saying and expect the knowledge of what calculus is and how it works to just appear to you. You have to like actually do the work of like sitting down and trying to understand like the principles of it and what it means. And it's the same thing with the with Buddhism. It's just with the experience instead. You do the same thing. You have to just clarify it for yourself and try to understand it. And then through trying to understand it, that's how the knowledge can arise, and not just through, sitting down and watching your breath, for example. In terms of meditation as well, like we said a bit before as well, the main thing really, rather than meditation, is sort of renunciation. Like the more you've renounced of sensual pleasures and distractions, that's the extent to which you'll have a collected mind that's more of a suitable basis for absorbing the teachings about impermanence and so on. Well, yeah, the understanding, it is like an experiential understanding, and not just sort of the mind thinking about things. Because yeah, like if it was merely the mind's like thoughts and views, you wouldn't be able to understand the mind and the thoughts and views. You can't. It's not self-referential in that way. So the understanding is on sort of a high level of the entire framework of the five aggregates and any experience that could come through it.
Mm-hmm. Maybe one more remark concerning the meditation word. As most of the time, there's a very narrow definition when it comes to meditation, and I think we addressed that in another question. You should not think about meditation as just sitting on the meditation couch and watching your breath. Meditation is literally, or should be regarded as literally, everything that has been described by the Buddha as practice. Reading suttas, trying to understand suttas, trying to make sense of your experience, cultivating non-craving through whatever method you want to do that, by probably initially restraint, some enduring, maybe some Brahmavihara practice, maybe some jhana practice. That is all meditation, or it should all be regarded as meditation. And in that sense, meditation is the practice, and it is what you must do to progress. But if your idea of meditation is just watching your breath or following Mahasi Sayadaw's practices or anything like that, like following something that disregards the nature of your experience right now, then that's probably not what you should do.
Yeah. And meditation is more about like what you're not doing rather than what you're doing,
No.
like we've said before. So if you just don't engage with sensual pleasures or distraction,
No.
that's like majority of the meditation you need.
No. That is really a really good approach. I think we have another question on that in the future. But in general, you can quite literally just sit in a room, in an empty room, for a few hours and just don't engage in sensuality, don't distract yourself, don't do any of those things. And you will know by then what it means to be dependent on sensuality, because you don't want to be in that room. You want to be everywhere else, and your mind will throw all kinds of prospects of sensuality, even cleaning the room or anything at you. And yeah, not acting out of any of those impulses. That is a great practice. Yeah, let's maybe move to the next question. And this one is from another anonymous person. And that person wants to know, what brings about understanding? Is it a combination of studying, repeating the teachings, living a simple life, contemplating, and meditating? I guess the root of my question is, what should a stream entry aspirant's day look like in terms of practicing the Dhamma? And I think this question is very related to what we answered in the last one. But yeah, maybe we can repeat it again, or maybe Saif has some points to add to the practices that I have described as meditation in the last question.
The main thing is that it doesn't matter what you do, it's about what you're not doing mainly. And so instead of thinking about what you do, all you need to do is concern yourself with not engaging with sensual pleasures, not distracting yourself, not engaging carelessly in company, in talk, in like trifling work, as the Buddha would say. And that basically gives you the space in your experience to basically notice what the Buddha was talking about. But yeah, it's not only just coarse sensuality, by the way. It's not just like ceasing from watching movies or going on social media. But you really, if you want to be a stream mentor, you really do have to stop distraction. That's the main thing. That's why, like the Buddha says, the trainee's decline. 5 causes for trainee's decline would be like too many duties and responsibilities that he has to engage in. He gets stuck in like trifling work, too much talk, company, and so on. Because if you haven't been withdrawn sufficiently before, that sort of that level of engagement with the senses, with the world, and so on, will sort of be a basis for continued proliferation of your sense of ownership. That closeness to your senses, it fuels it. So you have to be withdrawn from distraction, and then the extent of that non-engagement with the senses will really allow you to have that space, which lets you basically see all these 5 aggregates, including intentions, including consciousness, including perceptions, whatever it is, as just there, arisen by itself without your interference. And then all you need to do is just basically notice it. But like I said, all of that is basically more about the fact that you haven't been engaging in sensuality or distraction, and not about the things you have been doing.
No. That is always the important point. Again, you can read the suttas countless times, and whenever you pick a sutta at random, the chances are very good that he talks about some kind of non-doing. Non-greed, non-aversion, non-delusion, non-cruelty, non-ill-will, non-this, non-that. It's all about none. And this is why the practice can look so different from person to person, and that is why it's so hard to generalize. Because every person has other cravings, and thus they try to abstain from different things. And you must, and this is why there is no general procedure that we can give you. That's why you must look into your own experience, find out your own intentions, and then restrain the intentions that are rooted in greed, the intentions that are rooted in aversion, and the intentions that are rooted in the urge to distract yourself from boredom, as an example. This is maybe we can also clarify a bit more what is meant by distraction. I think that is a very vague term. Maybe you can say something about that.
Yeah, I mean, like distractions is very hard to see if you haven't already been restrained in like the virtue and the more coarse sensuality. But yeah, like once you have stopped engaging with coarser sensuality and you have nothing to do, then like Flav says, like you're alone, you're by yourself, you're in your room, and then the mind has a tendency towards just doing things, engaging for no reason other than just distracting yourself, basically getting away from that pressure of the neutral feeling. Doesn't mean you can never act again. You know, if you have duties and so on, and you need to act, as long as the intention isn't rooted fundamentally in you trying to just basically get away from the pressure of neutral feeling, then obviously you can engage with it to the extent necessary. But if you have nothing to do and your first instinct is I need to like work on the next project or just engage, then you're basically just proliferating the sense that like my gratification is going to be in the future. And that's why like distraction is within the sensual domain, because it is like you distract yourself and then like it's only like a few seconds away from then the further going in towards sensuality. It's also within the same domain. And like we said before as well, distraction, if you've not been withdrawn before, it is a basis for your continued self-view. Obviously, if like you have been withdrawn, then you are able to go back to sort of duties and responsibilities without it being a basis for delusion setting in. But before that, too much engagement is always going to be a basis for continued delusion. So it needs to be drawn back a bit. Distraction is like, that's why I like the greed, aversion, and then it's called delusion, but we say distraction. They're sort of the same thing. But delusion is a good way to think of it, because distraction is fueling delusion, basically. Like engagement with the senses unnecessarily. It's just taking it up. It's the sense of ownership.
No.
So for a stream enterer, aspirant, that's the main thing. After coarse sensuality that's been restrained, distraction. Restraining that is going to be like shoot your practice up really high.
Mm-hmm. And it's very important. I mean, you can just make a very small experiment or think back to the past. If you literally just sit in a room, in an empty room, with all the screens turned off and no buttons to push or anything like that, and then it's very likely that your past self would have just cleaned the house, finished all the tasks that can be done until there's literally no more means of interaction available to you. And only then, and then your mind will find another thing that you can do. There's always this immense pressure to do something. And this must be restrained.
even like if you end up practicing that, you realize like a lot of people, they do meditation and they think about the Dhamma, they reflect on the Dhamma for purposes of distraction. And that's sort of like, you think it's like thinking about the Dhamma is automatically wholesome, but obviously if it's coming out of distraction, that is, you're basically using your thoughts about the Dhamma as a basis for continued delusion. And unless you have practiced that restraint of distraction beforehand, you don't know really how deep it goes. And yeah, all of your thoughts might be completely rooted in that. And yeah, if you proliferate that, then there's no way you can really understand the teaching.
No. If I remember back, then I can see many instances where I literally just started watching Dhamma videos when I already had all the necessary information, just because I did not want to deal with the boredom at that moment. Then I went to the other room, and I knew that I even knew why I was doing it. There was the intention present at the moment. I'm just doing this because I don't want to deal with the feeling, with the boredom. Yet my mind still was stronger than myself in that situation, as an example, and I went and distracted myself with Dhamma videos, with stuff I already knew, with videos that I had already watched. It goes deep. Yeah. This is very important.
It's like your whole life for aeons of samsara. So I don't think it's not you that this is this is directed to, basically.
No.
Almost everyone is completely overrun by tendency towards distraction. Because if you like abide without distraction, without sensual pleasures, without prospect of further project, that is the renunciation, and it is scary because it's no more of the being and so on.
It can even feel dreadful and like outright terror. So you might want to be a bit careful. You first want to restrain the cause, sensuality, and then move to the bottom, and not so much the other way around. If you just sit in a room right now without any means of distracting yourself from that bottom, then you might as well have a very uncomfortable time ahead of you. So this is
it might be a good way to realize just how much you are pressured by the boredom, just to test it out. But then gradual training is the best way to be able to handle that.
Yeah, I think that answers that question in a lot of detail, and I think we will have another one that is quite similar in the future. So let's move to the next question. And this one is from Carrot Zauxi. And she wants to know, can you explain Brahmaviharas in detail? What it really means and why people confuse jhana and Brahmaviharas? I think Thaif gave a very good answer, a very detailed answer on Brahmaviharas in general in one of our last Q&A videos. So in essence, Brahmaviharas are the practice of non-aversion through first non-ill will, then non-cruelty, then non-discontentment, and then non-aversion itself. So equanimity, it peaks in upekkha. And jhana also kind of peaks in upekkha. It's not called like that, but the fourth jhana is also mindfulness purified by equanimity. And that equanimity is very similar, only that the equanimity of the Brahmaviharas is achieved through practice of restraining your aversion or restraining your hatred, while the equanimity of the jhanas is achieved through restraining lust. And as they are so similar, as they both target the reduction of craving, it's easy to confuse them with each other. And there's also the problem that people all around the world have very different ideas of what jhana and Brahmaviharas are, and neither of those are usually what the Buddha meant with jhana and Brahmavihara. So, as the Buddha explained them in the suttas, it's literally a practice of not doing certain things, namely not doing the lustful stuff and not doing the hateful stuff. And nowadays, jhana is often regarded as not that, and Brahmaviharas are often also regarded as something that is not that, namely the creation of all kinds of nice feelings, radiating feelings to others. And jhana is often some methodical approach, as we have discussed in numerous questions in the Q&A, as creating nice feelings for yourself through following some method that induces calm and then zooms in on some object. So that is more or less always that. Yeah, I hope that answers that question. Maybe you have something to add?
No, that's it really. We did talk about Brahmaviharas in the Q&A.
Yeah. Maybe go back to that one. It's probably in the last video for a more detailed description of the Brahmaviharas. Yeah. Okay, let's move to the next question. This one is from another anonymous person, and that person wants to know, how is sloth and torpor a hindrance? I would think it is perfectly in line with non-doing. And how do we find that right balance if we really feel tired? This one is for you.
Non-doing doesn't mean literally not doing anything. So for example, if you're just being lazy and you're just sitting about, that's not necessarily non-doing in the sense that we're talking about. Non-doing or non-activity basically means no activity that is rooted in craving and therefore in the sense of ownership, because that's basically the true action. The doing is in the sense of self. Obviously, if you have self-view and you use sensuality and distraction and so on, whenever you act, it's always done with your sense of self. Well, that's not necessary connection, basically. And when you're withdrawn from the realm of craving, you are able to act without it being related to your sense of doing or activity. And so body is moving, but mind is non-active. It's not being dispersed into it. So that's where you got to realize the activity we're talking about is activity rooted in in craving, in lust, aversion, and distraction. And sloth and torpor is always within the realm of ownership, of craving. And in this sense, it's in the realm of your doing. Even though you're being lazy or being slothful, you're not doing anything. In the sense that we're talking about, you're very much doing something. You are taking up the experience. You're being averse to like the unpleasant feeling of activity and so on. Wherever it is being used as a basis for your ownership and continued sense of doing. So yeah, in another sense, for example, non-doing is very much is activity in the sense that you need to put effort into it. It's not something that happens automatically. Non-doing is something that you have to cultivate. But then once you have cultivated it, you can start to relax it, because you realize that it is all about not doing. But that's the thing, like when you're starting out, you always end up doing it. You have to do wholesome action. It's only after you've done wholesome action for a while you can let go of all action. So yeah, I hope that clarifies the two senses of activity. Obviously, you need to experience it for yourself, because for Pratujana's experience, every movement of the body, of the speech, of the mind is associated with the sense of self, and there's no division between movements of body and so on and the extent to which the ownership is adding on to it. You only see that through the restraint.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So in essence, the entire realm of non-doing, true non-doing, or non-self, perception of non-self, only really becomes available with the right view as a more or less minimum requirement. Before that, there's always a certain taking up of that experience, a certain kind of ownership, and that only really fades away with the fading away of ignorance. As the chain of dependent origination puts it, there's ignorance at the top, and only when that ignorance fades, the self at the bottom can go away for a while. So do not get discouraged when it will take a while, because it kind of requires that breakthrough, that attainment of the right view to clearly see it. So it's lots of repetition, and then there's a point of confirmation.
As for the last question, how do you find the right balance if you do feel tired? Well, one thing is that you have to realize, you have to think about the causes first of why you feel tired. Whether it is like natural tiredness, or like you've been awake for a long time, or whether it's just out of slothfulness, or like excessive engagement of sensuality can really tire you out, for example. Obviously, if it's those sorts of unwholesome reasons for tiredness, you have to, in the future, restrain those. And then, like we've talked about before, like the tireless energy can start to arise as a result. But if you're genuinely like tired, like get some sleep. Or if you are being intent on wakefulness, there's that sutta, I can't remember which sutta it is, but like the Buddha gives all these things of like, reflect on the Dhamma for a while, or, walk for a bit, for example, and, see if it helps you get that alertness. But then at the end of all those things he recommends, he says, if not, then sleep for a while being intent on wakefulness. Don't sleep more than you have to, and so on. And then, don't indulge in laziness when you wake up, and get back to persistence, basically.
Mm-hmm. When you have trained yourself to the point that you can see your intentions somewhat routinely, let's put it like that, then it will also be quite clear if you are acting out of sloth and torpor, or if you are genuinely just tired. So that is always kind of the goal, that you train yourself to a degree that you can actually know your intentions very much while they are arising. So then you always know and cannot self-cheat anymore. Yeah.
Sloth and torpor is a little bit it's a hard one to see, because people don't usually think of like laziness and indolence as within sensual domain, but it very much is once you've seen your intentions sufficiently, and you realize it is part of the same, rooted in the same intentions of craving as coarser sensuality.
No. There's a reason why Sloth and Torpor is among the 5 hindrances. Those are all in the sensual domain. So you kind of can reflect on that. Yeah. I think that answers that question pretty nicely. Let us maybe move to the next one. And this one is from another anonymous person. And the person wants to know, I read a sutta yesterday that said, or maintain the knowledge that there is a body to the extent necessary in regards to knowledge and remembrance. So it is just remembering there is a body or the breath enough. Well, this is a bit vague because I have to know enough for what, but I just assume for the attainment of the right view. And again, it depends on how you see the body or see the breath. It is not so much about being aware of your body as it is here and now, or your breath as it is happening here and now. It's more about the context of dependent origination. You want to see your body as a necessary condition that has to be there for your entire experience. And the same for your breath. So you can develop mindfulness of the body through the breath, in a sense. And this is always a goal, that you see the relationship, that there is something that is necessary for you to be as a self. And when you see that in sufficient clarity and have understood all the sankharas, as we have explained in, I think, the first or the second video, then the Dhamma, namely your sense of self, the thing kind of has to fade away or move into the background, become non-self. So in that sense, the knowledge that there is a body is sufficient when you see it that way. The body as the container of your entire experience. The body as that what is necessary for you to even have those thoughts and everything else. Then it is enough. Otherwise, it is not enough. Anything else?
Yeah. I mean, like you said, there's if you haven't got that sense of awareness yet, you can't just maintain the knowledge there is a body, and rather you need to be working to clarify what the nature of the body is. And then, yeah, once you clarify it enough, that's all you need to do. You need to just basically notice it, just remember it, basically. Because the clarity has already been established. Just remembering the fact of body reestablishes that clarity, basically, that you've already created.
Yeah.
That's why it's enough to just remember that, and that'll do all the work and continue it for you.
Maybe we should say another word about what the body actually is. Could you add something on that? Because it's not, very likely not what you think of as a body. There's always a kind of double meaning. The Buddha made a difference between the body and the body in the body. And understanding that usually requires the right view, to be honest, but it's still good to point people to the fact that those are two different things. Could you say something on that one?
I mean, the main thing is that normally what people think of as the body is usually like a conceiving or an image in their mind. They usually either perceive the body through like their eyes and so on, or how they feel, they think about it, but none of those are like the factual body. Factual body is the basis by which you perceive or intend or think about the body. So you realize that the factual body is something that you can only ever indirectly see. It's not something you can kind of conceive and think about. It's the basis for your conceivings. So that's the main thing. That's why you need to develop that clarity first. And till then, you're not really seeing the body. You're just seeing your perceivings about the body and so on.
Yeah. So you should maybe think about that body that we are talking about more as a knowledge, as an indirect knowledge, and not so much as the physicality that you very likely think about. It's not so much about what is sitting here, breathing and whatnot. It's more that indirect basis for you to even think about all those. So it's not the mental image that you have, but a condition that is necessary for everything else. And the same is, by the way, true for all the contemplations when it comes to dependent origination. Those are always conditions, pretty much. Feeling as a basis for the entirety of your experience, mood, whatever. I think the Buddha named 20 different kinds of contemplation pairs that you can use for insight, but all work based on the same principle. Yeah, I think that's enough on that question. Let us move to the next one. And this one is a long one from another anonymous person. Just to confirm, you are saying that the jhanas that the jhanas the Buddha talked about were states that one would experience usually after stream entry. But is it possible to experience temporary jhana-like states that feel great before one attains stream entry? For example, the kinds taught by Brasington and many other teachers, but it is a mere absence of hindrances and not actual freedom. This one is for you, as you always get the jhana questions.
Yeah, the right jhana is definitely only after stream entry. The jhanas in themselves are not like even the ones that the Buddha was talking about without the right view. They were able to be attained without the right view technically. But today, really, if you're anywhere close to jhana and you have heard the Buddha's teaching, it's basically impossible not to have the right view, because like we've said before, in jhana, there is no more self. And you have been withdrawn to that degree where it's like you would only need like a sentence to basically just notice what's very visible in your experience. That's why we say that like the jhanas are not really things you can experience without stream entry. They should be so co-equivalent in your experience. As for the jhana-like states, the feel great, the taught by Brasington and so on, the ones that are usually based on some sort of concentration of an object, whether that's like completely absorbed in it or if it's more of a wide awareness. Either way, there's not really like an absence of the hindrances even then, because it's just basically, it's no more an absence of the hindrances than like falling asleep is basically. For an absence of the hindrances, you need to be withdrawn from the domain of sensuality through your actions basically. Those jhana-like states are not really useful if you are wanting to attain the real jhanas or wanting to attain what the Buddha was talking about in terms of freedom from sensuality or something. It's not really useful to think of them as jhana-like, because they have some of the qualities the Buddha talks about in terms of jhana, like the joy and the pleasure and so on. But it's not really putting you in any of the direction of the actual non-sensuality and so on. Engaging with them will not tell you about non-sensuality and the freedom from suffering, really. So it's kind of the opposite direction of the jhana we talk about. Yeah.
Oh, now that's pretty important. Those methods generate calm. That's probably a good way of putting it. They make your mind calm, they make your body calm. The mind is not jumping around too much, but they are not a suitable basis for insight. Those things are generally focused on one aspect of experience. But to gain insight, you need at least two aspects of experience, namely one thing that you see as a sankhara, as a condition for your entire experience, and then whatever else is there that you take up as self. And that requires two. So anything that zooms in on just one object can never be any suitable basis for any insight to arise. That means that, whenever you practice those, you very much move away from liberation and not toward that, even if you think otherwise. This is very important. And not only that, they also kind of remove suffering from your life. And to understand suffering first has to be there and acknowledged. And when you don't do that, because you immediately make it go away, then we have a harder time understanding that. So the breakthrough to the Four Noble Truths will be very unlikely if you tailor your circumstances in a way that there is no more suffering, or that you can make suffering go away at the click of a button, pretty much. And that is what we do with sensuality as practitioners. When we experience suffering, then we turn on the TV and then we watch something so that we are distracted from our suffering. And it's not too different, in essence, from turning on your meditation method so that there is calm and no suffering anymore. That's the same principle. Doing something to get something. Yeah. Anything else you want to add to that?
Yeah. I guess, like you said, the Brazenton jhana and so on, it gives you calm, but it's not necessarily the calm the Buddha was talking about, or like you said, the calm that's used for insight. Like the reason why calm is conducive to insight is basically because, you know, when you're withdrawn from sensual domain, you basically are stepping back from being absorbed in the world and in the objects. And like you said, that gives you the opportunity to see what's like the condition of it, because you're no longer absorbed in what's going on. But the calm that comes from the concentration in object is obviously, it's not giving you that withdrawal. It's always dependent on, to some degree, being absorbed, concentrated on something in front of you. So it gives you calm, but not the one that's conducive to insight. And it's not the type of calm then that can free you from suffering.
No. Well, that's a major problem. And people usually do not see it and actually feel very challenged in their views when we point that out. Like they really hate it. There's really quite a lot of aversion towards that. That's why I kind of became hesitant to even talk about that too much. But it's obviously good for the people who really and honestly want to have the right view, that they do it right, even if it feels a bit bad at first to know that they might have made a mistake. No. Yeah.
I mean, even if you experience these the Brazenton jhanas and so on, like if you don't agree with those and so on, that's fine. But then you still have to like think about, for your own situation, like, am I free from suffering? Do I know the escape from suffering, like domain of suffering? Like if I go ill the next day, like terminal illness, would I suffer from that? And do I know the escape from that? If not, then I have to be doing something beyond the jhanas that I'm practicing. And you can't be just happy alone with that if your goal is freedom from suffering. And so we can point some other directions that you can think about developing, maybe instead or alongside of whatever you want to do. Either way, you have to, for your own self, for your own experience, for your own welfare, think about what I need to be doing to understand the Four Noble Truths and escape suffering. So,
yeah.
That's like when I used to practice these jhanas, I like developed them to like the fourth jhana as practiced by Brazenton, and I just realized I get this calm, but I still suffer basically, and I still basically don't know fundamentally how to escape from that domain. So I had to like just start looking elsewhere, and that's basically what you have to do by having a much clarified goal, the ultimate goal. It will keep pushing you towards the right place. And the correct jhana that the Buddha talked about is the jhana that frees you from suffering as a whole. So
yeah, I think that is a very good and detailed answer to that question, and I think that is actually enough for today, as our time is approaching an end. Thank you again very much for watching, and if you enjoy what we do, feel free to like and subscribe and all those things, and maybe we see us in the next video. Bye.